Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to Mailbag, the all-mailbag show here on Collider Video, where all we do is take your mailbag questions. My name is John Campbell. I am the senior producer of Collider Video, and I am so glad you decided to join us on this Sunday. Now, for those of you who don't know, Mailbag is our very relaxed, laid-back show. We talk a little behind the scenes. We'll talk about obviously a lot of movie questions. We'll take some television stuff too. Very informal. It's just a chance for us to hang out a little bit on the weekend before we watch some football a little bit later. Yes, I know. Some of you don't like when I talk about football, but tough. I love football. So, hey, listen, we're not going to waste a lot of time today, except just to tell you and remind you that how do you get one of your questions on Mailbag? Real simple. You email us at collidervideo@gmail.com. Send on in your question. Now, we do get over 1,000 questions every week, so understand, you can send in a question, you might not get on the show, but we will do our best, and maybe you'll see your show pop up here on Mailbag on Saturdays or Sunday, or maybe you'll see it pop up on one of our movie talk shows Monday through Friday. So with all that out of the way, let's get to the first question of the day. And the first question today comes to us from Anton The Legend, who writes, "Hey Collider, big fan of the show." Well, thank you so much, Anton. Appreciate that. So with Pawn's Sacrifice, starring Tobey Maguire, soon releasing, why haven't you talked about the trailer or really talked about the movie at all? I thought the trailer looked pretty good and the story is kind of interesting. If it's done right, maybe even an Oscar nomination? Well, thanks a lot for the question, Anton. We have brought up Pawn's Sacrifice in the past. We haven't talked about it a lot, though, granted. But Pawn's Sacrifice with Tobey Maguire represents one of those movies that is kind of on the fence with us. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Pawn's Sacrifice is open, by the way. It's already released. And if I'm not mistaken, it opened in like the average big wide release film that now get between 2,000 and 3,000 screens, sometimes even a little bit over 3,000 screens. Pawn's Sacrifice, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe opened on 33 screens. 33. Now, what that means is that, and this is a question that we bring up around movie talk a lot, when there's a lot of different movies, and then we've got to decide which movies do we spend time talking about, which movies do we not. And since, movie talk is really for the broader audience, one of the things that we talk about is which movies do we spend time talking about if the audience watching us talking about it won't even have a chance to go see it. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of indie films and smaller films that we do spend time on, but we don't spend time on all of them. One of the reasons is because what is the point? This is the question we ask ourselves, is what would be the point of us spending much time talking about this particular movie if it's a movie that most of our audience, even if we got them interested in seeing it, they couldn't go see it? Because it's only playing in 8 theaters, because it's only playing in 40 theaters, because it's only playing in 33 theaters. Now, I'm not sure. I simply don't know. I did send out an email to the studio to ask if it would be then getting a wider release, and I simply haven't got an answer. They haven't got back to me. I haven't found an answer to that. And so we just never really did. Now, don't get me wrong. Just because a movie gets a small release, you might say to me, but John, you guys have talked about a lot of movies that have had small releases. Yes, but you'd probably also recognize that it's probably 1 out of every 30 films that are getting a very, very, very limited release that we'll talk about. Usually if something really big or very interesting is happening surrounding that film. With Pawn's Sacrifice, while it looks like a good movie, it's not like anything remarkable has happened around it that has necessitated us bringing it up as a topic. Once again, understanding the background and the context, that it's one of those movies that is just playing on a very finite number of screens, and so we could talk about it, but it wouldn't apply to 90% of our audience. So 90% of our audience would just tune out, even if we were talking about it. As it turns out, we're talking about it right now anyway. So yeah, those are the questions we have to ask. Now, here's an interesting thing. We were still interested in the film, and we had scheduled to have Tobey Maguire actually come into studio. And so we were going to promote the film that way by having them send in Tobey Maguire. And we had it on the books for a while, but eventually they had to cancel. I understand, no sour grapes on our part. Totally understand. Tobey Maguire's a busy dude. This happens all the time. Being on Movie Talk is not the high priority. I totally get it. No hard feelings at all. But we did have that avenue open as a way to talk about Pawn Sacrifice, and we invited the studio to send him down, and we had booked it, and then things came up and they had to cancel. Totally understandable. But that was kind of the one excuse we had to talk about the film. And so nothing else really came up surrounding the film, and so we didn't talk about it much. And like I said, it would have been rather odd to spend much time talking about it when it would have been alienating about 90%. And once again, I totally acknowledge that as what many of you would say, but John, there are several other movies that had small releases you talked about. Yes, but usually there's something remarkable surrounding it, or whatever, or we didn't realize it didn't have a wide release coming, or something like that. But for the vast majority of these films that come out in really small limited release, a lot of those films don't get attention on Movie Talk because we generally talk about the movies that everybody will have the opportunity to see in theater if they so choose to see it. And so we weren't ignoring it. Like I said, we've brought up Pawn Sacrifice before. We certainly were ignoring it. We wanted to give it more attention by inviting Tobey to come down into studio. It didn't work out. No big deal. Although we were excited to have him in here, but it didn't work out, and that's okay. But that's why you didn't see us talk much about Pawn Sacrifice. But I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm probably going to go see it next week. If you guys have seen it, jump in the comments section. Let us know what you thought of Pawn Sacrifice, and let us know if you think it's worth going to check out. Thanks a lot for the question. All right, let's move on to the next question now. And this next question comes to us from Ben Rayner, who writes, I am a big fan and watch your show every day. Well, thank you so much, Ben. Really appreciate that. I was just curious about the film Jane Got Your Gun. Where is it? I thought it was supposed to come out on September 4th, 2015. I looked it up and it doesn't even have a release date. Is it finally dead? What are your thoughts? Thank you and keep bringing the filthy. Well, thank you so much, Ben. We will keep bringing the filthy. And just a quick correction. The name of the movie isn't Jane Got Your Gun. The name of the movie is Jane Got a Gun. That's the actual name. So maybe I'm just speculating. Maybe the reason you had a hard time finding is because you were mixing one of the words up. It's Jane Got a Gun. Jane Got a Gun. For those of you who don't know, it's a new Natalie Portman film. This is a film that has had so much drama surrounding it that somebody, maybe John Schnepp, needs to do a documentary about the drama just surrounding them trying to make this movie. For those of you who don't know, so not only is Natalie Portman starring in it, she produces the film as well. So here is the long list of the comedy versions. Now, you're right, it was supposed to come out on September 4th. But it was going to be released by Relativity Media. And for those of you who've been keeping up to date on the world of movie news, Relativity just declared bankruptcy not long ago. So a lot of their films went up in the air. Now, just recently, the Weinstein Company, Jane Got a Gun, was able to get out from their commitments to Relativity because of their bankruptcy. And Weinstein Company has just stepped in, picked up the distribution rights, and from what I understand, Jane Got a Gun is now getting a release in February of 2016. So that is a bit of a push, but at least it's going to get a release now, because I'm actually quite curious to see this movie and see how all this drama plays out. But this movie, Jane Got a Gun, and if you don't know much about it, the reason Ben is saying things like, is it finally dead? Well, here's why. So when this movie started, they had this director, right? And what they had is they had Michael Fassbender on to play the good guy, and they had Joel Edgerton on to play the bad guy, okay? Michael Fassbender playing good. Natalie Portman is the main heroine in it. But then you had Michael Fassbender as the good guy, Joel Edgerton as the bad guy. Joel Edgerton, by the way, who is remarkable right now in Black Mass with Johnny Depp that's in theaters. I think Joel Edgerton is going to get an Academy Award nomination for it. I loved him in Warrior. He's a great actor. Anyway, Michael Fassbender, good guy. Joel Edgerton, bad guy. Then what happens is Michael Fassbender leaves the production, I think due to a scheduling conflict with X-Men. So he leaves. So what happens is they take then Joel Edgerton, who is the bad guy, and they move him into the good guy role. And then they go out and get Jude Law to come in and play the bad guy, which Joel Edgerton was playing. So now Fassbender's gone. Joel Edgerton becomes a good guy. Jude Law comes in to play the bad guy. Well, then what happens after that is on the first day of shooting, I'm not joking, the first day of shooting, the director shows up and says, I'm leaving. On the first day of shooting, the director shows up and says, I quit. So that throws production into total disarray. So then what happens is Jude Law, who came on to play the bad guy that Joel Edgerton was playing, but he moved over to the good guy to replace Michael Fassbender. Jude Law goes, well, wait a minute. The only reason I came is because I wanted to work with that director, and now that director has quit. So I quit too. So Jude Law leaves. So now, once again, we have no bad guy. So then Bradley Cooper comes in, and he signs on to play the bad guy. Now, after Bradley Cooper signs up, a new director, Gavin O'Connor, who directed Joel Edgerton in that movie Warrior with him and Tom Hardy, they worked great together. I think he's a really solid director. He comes on. But after Gavin O'Connor comes on, Bradley Cooper, who had come on to play the bad guy, he goes, actually, now because the schedule got mixed up, now I got to leave. So Bradley Cooper leaves. So we had Fassbender and Edgerton. Fassbender leaves. Edgerton moves to good guy. We had Jude Law come in to play bad guy. Director leaves. Jude Law says, then I got to leave. Then Brad Cooper comes in to play the bad guy. Bradley Cooper says, I got to leave. They get in Gavin O'Connor as the new director. And then finally, I believe they settled on Ewan McGregor. Then Ewan McGregor comes in and he comes on to play the bad guy. And I believe that's where things settled off with Gavin O'Connor directing. Natalie Portman, of course, is the main character in the film. Joel Edgerton playing the good guy, and I believe Ewan McGregor playing the bad guy. I don't know anything about the film, but I believe that's the way it shook out. Crazy drama, just this rotating door of things going on. And I have been almost morbidly fascinated, but legitimately fascinated too, to see this movie. Because, I mean, you can look at it negatively and say all these people left, the director left, a rotating a carousel going on of musical chairs of who's playing what. You can look at it negatively, but you can also look at it very positively and say, man, how good is this project, at least on paper, that Michael Fassbender wanted to be a part of it in the first place, that Joel Edgerton wanted to be part of it, that at some point Jude Law wanted to be part of it, that a guy like Bradley Cooper wanted to be a part of it, that Gavin O'Connor wanted to come on and direct it. I mean, so yeah, there's negative ways you can look at all this, and it's unavoidable to look at it in some negative light. But also there's a positive way of looking at that. Man, this project must be something pretty special. Like the script must be real good, and the vision for the movie must be really good if all these big, huge name guys were at least at some point wanted to be a part of this movie. So yeah, it was with Relativity, supposed to come out September 4th. Relativity does bankruptcy. Jane Got a Gun gets out from under Relativity. Weinstein step in, and now they are going to release the film, but it's not going to come till about February 2016. So that's where things stand right now. I hope all that made sense with you, because man, it's hard to keep up with the drama of Jane Got a Gun. Like I said, Schnepp, do a documentary on what happened with this film and how it finally came together. All right, let's move on to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Dylan Davidson, who writes, since there is so much speculation and rumor that Darth Plagueis might be in The Force Awakens, could the awakening be referring to Plagueis being resurrected/awakened? Plagueis was described as being as a being that can cheat death, and it would be interesting if they brought in the former master of the Emperor as a main villain. Could the new Star Wars universe possibly be centered around the return and reign of Darth Plagueis? And could the Episode 7 title be yet another clue to support that theory? I think it would be really cool if they used him as a character that returns from death and decides to pick up the pieces of a broken empire and fix the failure of Palpatine, his apprentice. Thanks, and keep up the great work. Well, for those of you who don't know what Dylan is talking about and don't speak Star Wars-ese, many of you know the Emperor, Palpatine, Darth Vader's master. Well, what we learned in the prequels was that Palpatine, the Emperor, he had a master by the name of Darth Plagueis. And Darth Plagueis was said to be the one Sith Lord who discovered the secret to cheating death. How good was he at cheating death? Probably not that good, because Palpatine then talks about how he killed Plagueis. Whatever. I thought he could cheat death. But one of the big pieces of speculation going around is that this supreme leader Snoke, the leader of the bad guys in the new Star Wars The Force Awakens Episode 7. There's a lot of speculation going around that Snoke is actually Plagueis. As a matter of fact, I've seen some leaked pictures, and they could be fake. They could totally be fake. Keep that in mind. Take this with a huge grain of salt. But I've seen some supposedly leaked pictures of Supreme Leader Snoke, of what he's actually going to look like in the movie. And if you've seen the cover to Darth Plagueis, the book, in which you see the face of Darth Plagueis, this action figure that is supposedly of Supreme Leader Snoke looks an awful lot like the book cover rendition of Darth Plagueis. So there's been a lot of speculation, even before those pictures came out, there's been a lot of speculation that Snoke will actually end up being Darth Plagueis. And that would make a lot of sense in a lot of different ways. As a matter of fact, I'm actually now leaning towards the idea that I'm actually now thinking 51 to 49%, I'm leaning towards ever so barely that I actually do think Snoke is going to end up being Darth Plagueis. Who knows, may change my mind in 2 weeks. But what you're asking is the title The Force Awakens, is that a reference to the return of Plagueis? I don't think so. Because it's already been confirmed that in that first trailer, have you felt it? There has been an awakening. It's already been confirmed that that is the voice of Snoke. That's the voice of Andy Serkis, who is going to be playing the character, at least doing the motion capture for Supreme Leader Snoke. So if Snoke is Plagueis, then Snoke wouldn't be talking about, hey, have you felt it? There's an awakening. If the awakening was about him, clearly he's already been around. I think Snoke has been around for a while. I think Supreme Leader Snoke has been the leader of the First Order. That's what they're calling the Empire now. Or this version of the Empire. They're calling them the First Order. I think he's been in charge of it a long time. Now, I can't back that up. I'm just saying it seems to me to make sense that he's been around a while. So while I do kind of buy into the theory that Supreme Leader Snoke is actually Darth Plagueis, I don't buy into the theory that the title, The Force Awakens, refers to the resurrection or the coming back to life of Darth Plagueis. I think that plays out previously. So I think the title probably means something else. But who knows? It's an interesting theory. Let's see how it plays out in the weeks to come. All right, let's move on to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Kyle Marquis, who writes, Mad Max Fury Road is an awesome film. Am I right? Yes, Kyle, you're right. It is an awesome film. But even though it was just awarded Best Film of the Year by the international critics, well, there's no organization called the International Critics. There was a body that gave it an award. But anyway, I think it's safe to say it won't be nominated for a major Oscar, in all likelihood. But let's just say, for hypothetical discussion, it is nominated for Best Picture. I know it won't, but let's pretend. If it were to happen, would that be more of an indicator that the Academy is willing to look at other films other than the traditional Oscar bait, or is that just a huge fluke? Well, thanks a lot for the question, Kyle. First of all, I gotta say this. I reject that term Oscar bait because quite often, I know a lot of people use it. I know a lot of people in the industry use it. I reject the term. Because normally when people say Oscar bait, like I'll be in a discussion with a friend of mine, I say Oscar bait. Okay, well, if by Oscar bait you mean an excellent movie with an excellent story and an excellent script with excellent performances and an excellent director, then sure, that's Oscar bait. Because that's ultimately what it is. And, there's this mentality that the Academy won't look at certain types of movies. And I'm sorry, but like Grand Budapest Hotel, Wolf of Wall Street, Whiplash, Django Unchained. I mean, these aren't things that you would think of as Oscar bait, but they're excellent movies with excellent story and excellent performances and excellent direction. And they're excellent, excellent movies. And the Academy has no problem nominating them. Avatar just about won Best Picture, was certainly nominated for Best Picture. I mean, I go back to The Lord of the Rings, but The Lord of the Rings are a good example. Lord of the Rings are like fantasy films, for heaven's sakes, and all three of them got nominated for Best Picture. Return of the King, the final one, holds the record. It's tied for the record, I should say, by winning 11 Oscars. No other film has won more. And it won every single Oscar it was nominated for. So I reject this notion. I wholeheartedly reject this notion that the Academy won't consider other films. What I more find is that a lot of film goers who like the movies that I like, how do I put this tactfully? I find that a lot of the people who complain that X-Men doesn't get nominated for Best Picture or whatever doesn't get nominated, and then they complain that the Academy only considers these Oscar bait movies. What I generally find, and tell me in the comments section if you find this as well, I generally find that those people are guilty of the exact same thing they accuse the Academy of being, just in reverse. Because, I'll go to them and I'll say, well, good heavens, did you see, all these movies that got nominated for Academy Awards? And I'm just going to bring up a list here for a second. Best Picture winners lists. Okay, so I'll say to these people, like a lot of times these guys who will complain to me that, comic book movies don't get nominated or whatever, the Academy has a bias against them, they are actually guilty of the exact same things. Because if I go to that guy who's complaining to me that, X-Men Days of Future Past or Captain America Winter Soldier didn't get nominated for a thing, how dare the Academy? And I'll say to them, did you see Selma? No. Did you see Theory of Everything? No. Did you see Boyhood? No. Did you see Philomena? No. Did you see Nebraska? No. Did you see the Dallas Buyers Club? No. Did you see Lincoln? No. Did you see Les Miserables? No. Did you see Amour? No. It becomes frustrating to me because I find that a lot of these people who complain that the Oscars won't consider these films, they don't even go out and see the films. They don't even bother watching the films that are getting Oscar consideration. Anyway, that's a little bit of a mild the pet peeve of mine, but anyway, let's talk about Mad Max Fury Road. Here's the thing. We just did our, once the summer movie season was done, we were getting ready to go into Oscar season. We're kind of getting into Oscar season now. We, on Movie Talk, had a segment that we called the pre-Oscar season year so far, where we ranked our top 5 favorite and our top 5 worst and stuff like that. And I'll tell you, here we are in pre-Oscar season, and me, myself, even though I really liked Mad Max, I don't have Mad Max in my top 5. And that's before Oscar season. I have at least 5 other films ahead of it. And I'm not positive about this. I could totally be wrong about this. But I think the Oscars are going back to 5 nominees this year. I'm not sure. They still might be doing up to 10 nominees. I'm not really sure. But let's say for argument's sake, it was 5 nominees this year. If I was doing the Oscar voting, and I really like Mad Max wouldn't be nominated for Best Picture for me. I thought it was visually really cool and the action was great. It was a bombastic experience. It was fantastic. But like I said in my review of the film, I thought the story was kind of weak. I thought it treated the story as a very unimportant element of the movie. And maybe they're right. Maybe the story was an unimportant element and it really just was meant to be a visual feast for the eyes and the action to make it exciting. And it was certainly all of that. But I thought the action was weak. I thought the dialogue was kind of bad. I thought it felt a little bit convoluted and they didn't really explain why anything. It's like, wait a minute, who are these mothers in the desert and why do they matter? And it just felt kind of lazy. While in many ways it's intense genius, there were a couple of areas that I thought it was kind of lazy too. So me, myself, as in a total package, even though I really enjoyed watching Mad Max Fury Road, I had a great time. On the Rotten Tomatoes scale, if I had to be one of the people giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, I give Mad Max a thumbs up. I'm recommending that movie. But for me, it's not one of the 5 best pictures of the year. Now, Schnepp disagrees. Schnepp does have it in his top 5 right now. And I think Harloff also had it in his top 5, but there are a couple other people on the Movie Talk crew that don't have it in the top 5. So, and now that's without movies like The Revenant. That's not counting The Hateful Eight, which hasn't come out yet. That isn't counting a lot of these Oscar contending films that are still yet to come out this year. So I think there is a chance, by the way, I think there is a chance that Mad Max Fury Road gets a Best Picture nomination. If this year is still a year where they nominate 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 nominees. If they get into 7, 8, or 9, I think there's a decent chance that Mad Max Fury Road may get a nomination, as a matter of fact. You may see that happen. But I'm personally of the opinion, this is just me, that if it doesn't get a nomination, I'm not even going to blink. Because I'm not sure I'm going to have it in my top 10 by the end of the year. I think I have it in my top 10 as of right now. But once all these other major Oscar contending films come out between now and the end of December, a couple of which we've already mentioned, I think there's a good chance Mad Max isn't even in my top 10. So if it doesn't get nominated for a Best Picture, I won't complain. I think it'd be really cool if it did. But me, myself, I won't complain. So I reject the notion, personally, from my own point of view, and this is only my point of view, but I reject the notion that if Mad Max Fury Road doesn't get nominated for Best Picture, that it's some sort of, ripoff, or that it's some sort of snub, because me, myself, I wouldn't have nominated it either. And I know a bunch of people that feel the same way. So anyway, that's just my feelings on it. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts in the comment section below. I know a lot of you love Mad Max Fury Road, and you are going to think wholeheartedly it deserves to be nominated. Absolutely. Voice your opinion in the comment section below. All right, let's move on to the next item. And the next item up here, the next question comes to us from Charles Campbell, who writes, "Hi, Collider Movie Crew. I love your show, and I watch it every day." Well, thank you so much, Charles. Spoiler alert. My question is, do you think there is a chance that Spider-Man will die in Captain America Civil War? Since Marvel hates to kill off their established heroes, do you think this could replace the defining Captain America death we see in the comic books? Thanks, and bring on the filthy. Well, thanks a lot for the question, Charles. I've mentioned before, I'm kind of with you. I've mentioned before on this show, and I think almost all the Movie Talk crew agree, we don't think that Captain America is going to die in Civil War. As we've mentioned before, Chris Evans has already announced that he is in Avengers Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2. He says he's committed to shooting for 9 months for both of those movies back to back. If he's shooting 9 months, that means he's a major player in both of those films. And we had the Russo brothers, the directors, in our studio talking with me and Schnepp. And while we did not ask them directly and they did not say directly, both Schnepp and I had the impression that they had no intention of killing Captain America. But who knows? Anything's possible. Might happen. Let's not say it's impossible. It might happen, but I just don't see things going that way right now. Now, all that being said, you bring up an interesting theory of what if Marvel still wanted a significant death in Civil War. Maybe it's Tony, maybe it's somebody else, but what if they want a significant death? Could that significant death be Spider-Man? Interesting theory. Anything's possible. I do not think that is the case, and here's why I do not think you're going to see Spider-Man die in Civil War. Contrary to popular belief, Spider-Man does not belong to Marvel. Marvel does not have the rights to Spider-Man. Spider-Man still belongs to Sony. What the deal was, and it's surprising to me that all these months later, there's still a lot of people who have a misunderstanding about what the deal between Sony and Marvel is. A big deal was struck between Marvel and Sony, but a lot of people have this impression that the deal was that Marvel gets Spider-Man back. They did not get Spider-Man back. He still belongs to Sony. But the deal they struck, very interesting deal. We'll have to wait to see if it works out really great for either side, but it looks like a win-win. Marvel has the right. Sony will allow Marvel to incorporate Spider-Man into their movies, but Sony still owns them, and they are still going to produce the standalone Spider-Man films. And Sony will be allowed to use some of the secondary characters from the Marvel Cinematic Universe in their standalone Spider-Man movies. There is simply no way. Let's think about that for a second. Let's forget Sony for a second. Let's say you, whoever you are, let's say you own the rights to Spider-Man. And you are the one who made the deal with Marvel that Marvel gets to have your character in their movies. And in exchange, you can have some of the side characters in your standalone movies with Spider-Man. Would you allow Marvel to kill off the character? The obvious answer to that question is no. Sony would never let them kill off Spider-Man, And you and me, if we owned Spider-Man and we're in this deal, we would never allow Marvel to kill off that character. I am absolutely convinced, you know this is true, that before it was even okayed, Sony had to go through their script for Civil War, and they had to approve everything that Spider-Man was going to be doing in that movie. You know they did, because it's their property. And I just don't see any scenario in which Marvel would be allowed to kill off Spider-Man. There's just no way. I just can't see it. What is possible, and I really hope they don't do this because Marvel does this way too much in their movies, I hope they don't fake kill him. It's like, oh, at the end of Civil War, Spider-Man dies. Except he comes back to life. Marvel has... Look, I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I love the movie. Everybody knows I do. But one of the things they have done over and over and over and over and over and over and over again in their movies is kill off people, but not really kill off the people, because they all come back. I think the only one who hasn't come back from the dead is Thor's mother, and I am not going to be surprised at all if Rene Russo pops up in Thor Ragnarok. Because, they've killed off Loki twice and he keeps coming back. They killed Thor and he comes back. They killed Captain America, he comes back. I mean, everybody apparently dies at some point and then they come right back. Surprise, I'm not really dead. I mean, they just do that. So Nick Fury, they just killed Nick Fury in Captain America Winter Soldier. Oh, by the end of the film, he wasn't really dead. I mean, they've done it over and over to the point that we just don't buy it anymore. And I really hope they don't plan on doing that in Civil War as well. I really hope if they're going to kill some sucker, they just kill some sucker and leave them dead. Because this little shtick of theirs of, oh, we killed somebody, carries no dramatic weight anymore. Because we don't care. We don't care that you just killed somebody because none of us believe you actually killed them. They're going to be back in about 10 minutes. So I really hope Marvel has learned their lesson and don't do that again. I mean, hey, look. If they actually keep Quicksilver dead, then kudos to them. Kudos to them if they actually keep Quicksilver dead. I just won't be surprised if he's not, and he does pop up again in the future, because that's been Marvel's track record. So anyway, back to the original point of the question. No, I do not believe they're going to kill Spider-Man, because I simply don't believe it. I just can't imagine a scenario in which Sony would allow that to happen. Anyway, thanks so much for the question. Interesting theory, though. Let's see how that turns out. The next question comes to us from Adam Brunt, who writes, hey, guys, very loaded question. Okay, but who do you think is the best comic book movie director? Singer, Snyder, or Whedon? I'm well aware Snyder hasn't done many, but by the way Batman vs. Superman is looking, he could well make the answer a no-brainer. Thanks. Well, I mean, look, there is nobody anywhere who's more excited about Batman vs. Superman than I am. I am stoked. You all saw my reaction video to the trailer, lost my mind. I even thought the first teaser trailer was genius. I know a lot of people had some problems with the first teaser trailer, but I believe if you actually look at what's going on in that teaser trailer, I think it is a genius teaser trailer. But that second one just blew all of our minds. Incredible trailer. Might be easily the best trailer I've seen in years. Might be the best trailer I've ever seen. I don't know. Maybe I'm going into hyperbole. I have to reel myself in a little bit and I'll think about that. But let's not get ahead of ourselves with Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder's done Man of Steel. Now, some people don't like Man of Steel. I get that. I think the movie is nothing short of genius. I think it is a brilliant film. I think it is a brilliant Superman film. I think it is a brilliant Superman Origins film. I love that movie. And I wish more people understood or appreciated, I should say, the brilliantly done and crafted steps that movie takes. I think it's a fantastic film. But not everybody shares my opinion. Totally cool. But you're right. He's only done one comic book movie so far. And Batman vs. Superman is looking great. But let's not get too excited about a trailer. Remember, I thought the Transformers Age of Extinction trailers were awesome. And look how that piece of garbage turned out. So let's not get too ahead of ourselves. I also find it very interesting and maybe a little bit odd that in that list you didn't include what I think a lot of people might say is the clear winner, which is Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan, who gave us Batman Begins, who gave us The Dark Knight. I personally think the first Avengers film is the best comic book movie ever made, but there's a lot of people out there who think The Dark Knight is the best. You're going to find a lot of people who think that The Dark Knight is the best comic book movie ever made. So you got Christopher Nolan, who did Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Returns. I was disappointed in The Dark Knight Returns, but it has a lot of fans. That's 3 solid movies. So I would say right now, it would have to be Christopher Nolan right now. Even though I think Joss Whedon gave us the single best comic book movie ever made in The Avengers, Age of Ultron didn't quite live up to it. I don't think Age of Ultron is as good as The Dark Knight. And so I would have to go Christopher Nolan, even over Whedon, definitely over Snyder, probably over... Who were some of the guys also you mentioned? Oh, you also mentioned Bryan Singer. You know what? Bryan Singer's the answer. He's been more consistent. X-Men 1, X-Men 2, X-Men Days of Future Past. I think, while none of the X-Men films, this will spark some debate, I'm sure. While I believe that none of the X-Men films so far are as good as The Dark Knight, I think if you took the 3 Christopher Nolan Batman films and the 3 Bryan Singer X-Men films and put them all together and mash them all together in a big bag, I think the number 1 film, the best film out of that mix, is The Dark Knight. But I think number 2, number 3, and number 4 are all the X-Men films. I think X-Men, X-Men 2, and X-Men Days of Future Past are all better than Batman Begins or Batman The Dark Knight Returns, or The Dark Knight Rises, I should say. And I'm going to say, and plus, with Christopher Nolan, I have a hard time. I think with Batman, that was a match made in heaven. I think Christopher Nolan's style and sensibilities work great with Batman, but I don't know if Christopher Nolan would necessarily be a good fit for any other type of comic book character, or for any of the other properties out there. I'd certainly be down for finding out. I'd love to see it. But I think as a comic book movie director, I think I might have to go for Bryan Singer. Even though Christopher Nolan gave us the best out of that bunch, between Singer's movies and his own movies, I think The Dark Knight is the best out of all of them. I think number 2, 3, and 4 are all the X-Men films that Bryan Singer's directed, and therefore I'll go with it. I will say certainly Bryan Singer out of Snyder and Whedon, partially Whedon because he's only got the 2, whereas Singer has 3 and has had more consistency over them. I will go Singer. I would even personally put Bryan Singer strictly as a comic book movie director over Christopher Nolan. Who is the better director overall between Bryan Singer and Christopher Nolan? No brainer. Christopher Nolan. No brainer. But as far as comic book movie, I think I'll lean towards Bryan Singer. Now, I know there's some of you are probably going, yeah, John, that makes a great point. And then a lot of you are probably picking up things to throw at your computer monitor and spitting at me right now. I don't know. I'm sure this is going to leave, but this is all subjective. Leave me your thoughts in the comment section below. Let me know how you would rank those guys. All right, let's move on to the next question. Second to last question of the day. And this one comes to us from Jeff Kang, who writes, love the show, and I always listen during my car rides anywhere. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I'm glad we can come along for the ride. My question is, what are your thoughts on Heroes coming back? The show looks very promising, and seeing Hiro Nakamura back in the trailers was pretty badass. Also, would love to know your thoughts on the first incarnation of the show. Thanks. Thanks, you guys are the best damn movie and now TV news show on the planet Earth. Well, thanks a lot, Jeff. Yeah, Heroes Reborn is coming back, resurrecting that old show, Heroes. Heroes Season 1, you've heard me say this before. Heroes Season 1, to this day, is my favorite single season of television of any show ever. It's not my all-time favorite show, but Heroes Season 1 is my favorite single season of television I ever saw. That show hooked me in. True story. I think I might have told the story before, I'm not sure, but it's an absolute true story. I had my buddy Rodney. I was still living in Hamilton at the time. And my buddy Rodney had recorded all, he'd been watching Heroes, and I think it was up to like episode 9 or 10 or something. He had recorded all of them. And so he brought them over to my place one Saturday afternoon so I could start watching the show and get caught up so I could start watching the show. And I had a date that night with, believe me when I tell you, a smoking hot girl who was visually way out of my league. Anyway, I had a date I was really looking forward to lined up that night. Anyway, he brings over the show and I watched the first episode, and you know how that first episode ends. It's an incredible ending to a first episode. I'm like, whoa, and I got to watch the second one. So I watched the second one and I watched the third one, and then I look at my watch and say, I've got time to watch a fourth one before I got to get ready. So I watched the fourth one. Then I'm like, okay, screw getting ready. I can probably watch another one right now, be just a few minutes late. I just won't shower. So I watched the next one, and then I'm like, screw it, I'm canceling the date. And I got on the phone, called the girl, canceled the date because I wanted to stay in and watch more episodes of Heroes. That's how good that first season was. I absolutely loved it. Unfortunately, after season 1, that show kind of went right off the rails. Season 2 was a disaster. Season 3 was another disaster. And they just made all the wrong decisions after that first season, which was so genius and so great. So I'm a little torn on Heroes Reborn. On the one hand, I'm really nervous because they botched that show after the first great season. But on the other hand, I'm thinking, you know what? That first season was so great. Maybe they have learned from the mistakes of seasons 2 and season 3, and now they're going to come back and build on the strengths of the show rather than going off in a ton of stupid directions. So I'm hopeful for the show. Like I said, that first season of Heroes, one of my all-time. Actually, I became friends with the star of Heroes, the guy who played Peter Petrelli, Milo Ventimiglia. He's one of the dudes that is responsible for me meeting my wife. He actually brought Anne to the party that I met her at. And then Milo was on my show with me the following day, and she called in, and I never would have met Anne if it weren't for Milo, who played Peter in Heroes. And Milo and I still exchange, Twitter messages and emails every once in a while. So I have a connection to that show, and I have my heart is a real affinity for that show. But I got to be honest, at the same time, after season 1, the show kind of went off the tracks. So I'm really hoping they can get back to the greatness that the show was in its first season, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it turns out. I'll keep you updated. All right, time for the last question of the weekend. And the last question this weekend comes to us from Clyde Alaney, who writes, "Hello, Clyder crew. In January, February, March, April, May 18th, 2015 episode of Movie Talk, it was discussed about actor Matthew McConaughey reviewing his options for both the DC Cinematic Universe and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Campia, Schnepp, and Harloff all stated that they could see Matthew in the DC Cinematic Universe, and I do as well. So in pondering this concept, what would you all think of him as the big screen version of the Green Arrow? With all due respect to the great Stephen Amell, thanks for your time and keep on doing what you do so well." For those of you who don't know who Stephen Amell is the guy who plays Arrow on the TV version of the Green Arrow. And he is a fantastic Arrow. Love Stephen Amell. I think he's a great performer. Can't wait to see him in the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That being said, we all know very well that DC is keeping their television and their movie universes completely separate. So if we are going to see a Green Arrow on the big screen, it won't be Stephen Amell, it'll be somebody else playing him. So the question is, could you see Matthew McConaughey playing it? I generally don't like questions that are, hey, what do you think about this actor playing this role? My answer is always the same. Is it a good actor? Then sure, he could play the role, whatever. Or what would you think about this guy directing this movie? Sure, whatever. If he's a good director, why not? So generally speaking, I personally don't like these kinds of questions, but it has been a while since Matthew McConaughey talked about having different options to him. And it would be interesting. Green Arrow? On one hand, I would enthusiastically say yes. Just look at him. The guy looks like Oliver Queen. Look at this guy. This guy looks like he could be a rich millionaire playboy type of dude. It's Oliver Queen, Matthew McConaughey, sure. Plus, we know he can do action. He's got the body. He's got the physique. He can do all that kind of stuff. On the other hand, While I think there are a lot of roles that would be available to a McConaughey in both the DC Cinematic Universe and in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, McConaughey is 46. I just don't know if you start off a brand new character like that with an actor who's 46. Now, you can say, well, John, Ben Affleck's 43. Yeah, but they've already made the first movie with him. I mean, he's already on the way. If McConaughey were to sign up as Green Arrow, we're not getting a Green Arrow till at least 2018, at the earliest 2018, probably more like 2019, 2020. At that point, we've got an actor who's 48, 49, pushing 50, just starting as Green. Plus, I can see a older, grizzled, because of the different Batman stories we've read in the comics, I can totally see an older, grizzled, war-hardened Batman as being the Batman we get for the next few years. I don't see Green Arrow that way. I see him younger. I see him whatever. So, but at the same time, he's a great actor. You don't have to do Green Arrow that way. You can make him older as well. So I've got two thoughts on it. I'm not sure which way I go. I would love to know what you guys think. Given understanding his age, but also understanding his talent, would you be interested in seeing Matthew McConaughey as Green Arrow, or would you rather see him play another role in the DC or Marvel Cinematic Universe? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. All right, guys, that'll do it for me for this weekend's worth of mailbag. Thank you so much for joining us. Listen, don't forget, head on over and make sure you bookmark Collider.com. Collider.com with Steve Frosty Weintraub and his crack team of writers over there, keeping you up to date on everything going on in the world of entertainment, in movies and television. They do such a fantastic job. Make sure you're visiting that website every day and see what's going on over there. Once again, bookmark Collider.com. Most importantly, click subscribe, become a subscriber to this YouTube channel. Keep you up to date on all the movie talks, mailbags, Heroes, Jedi Council, and of course now all of our TV recap shows. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We would appreciate it a lot. Make sure you give a thumbs up to this video. And like I said before, what's important here is not what this idiot sitting in this chair in this office all by himself on the weekend has to say about your questions. What's important is what you guys have to say about these questions come up. Jump into the comments section. Be respectful. Jump in the comments section, be respectful of each other, and leave your thoughts on any or all of the topics that we discussed here today. I'm looking forward to reading them. So that'll do it for me, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. Oh, and by the way, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Facebook, simply at John Campia. I do a lot of my announcements there before I even announce them here on the shows. So make sure you're following me there. So that'll do it, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. My name is John Campia for Collider Video, and until next time, bye-bye.